Good evening. I'm Carolyn Rye, Chair of the School Board of Virginia Beach, and I hereby call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock p.m. on this 22nd day of February 2022. Pursuant to the school board's summer reopening plan adopted August 10th of this year and the school board vote on August 24th regarding health protocols for school board meetings, physical distancing will be used in chambers as a health mitigation strategy. Members of the public, as always, will be able to observe the school board meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. We welcome those present with us this evening here in chambers and our viewing and listening public as well. Madam Clerk, would you please indicate the attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Present in school board chambers is Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Felton, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Holtz, Ms. Hughes, Ms. Manning, Ms. Owens, Ms. Riggs, and Ms. Weems.
Okay, thank you. Would all present now please join me in a moment of silence? And please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Recognitions? Madam Clerk, do we have recognitions this evening?
There are no awards this evening.
Okay. All right, so we proceed to adoption of the agenda. And as a note, a reminder, we are adding item 18, continuation of workshop. Any other modifications? All right, hearing none, motion to approve. Mrs. Riggs, a second. Mrs. Franklin, all in favor, show a raised hand.
Madam Chair, we have unanimous vote.
Thank you. And now that brings us to the monthly superintendent report, and I turn it over to Dr. Spence.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. Here are a few items of interest for you and our families to know this evening. I'll begin with just a reminder for our school calendar that Monday, March 14th will be a staff day. We will not have school for students that day. Second, every day our teachers and staff members, as you know and have seen tonight, are committed to serving and supporting our students. Therefore, during the month of February, we're encouraging you to show the love and recognize a teacher or staff member you appreciate. We're asking our community to share why someone they work with is great, or why their child's teacher goes above and beyond, or that our school's food service, custodial, transportation teams, nurses, and other staff members are the best. And to show the love, simply visit vbschools.com, click the Let's Talk button on the right-hand side, and choose the topic, Show the Love. Also this month, make sure you join us online February 24th for the next webinar in our Family Connection series. In this session, participants will hear from local business leaders about job opportunities and how to be best prepared to enter the workforce after graduating from high school. This session will be most relevant for families of students who are in grades 9 through 12, and you can register in advance for this webinar by visiting vbschools.com. Now, I know it's been a bit since we recognized a staff member as a Compass Keeper. However, we have a very special Compass Keeper video for you this evening. I want to take a moment to highlight Ms. Maya Chaka, who currently serves as the Director of Middle School Programs for the Achievable Dreams Academy at Lynn Haven Middle School. However, back in 2021, while working as a health and physical education teacher with Renaissance Academy, her hard work made history, and she had the entire world buzzing with the announcement from the NFL that she was to be their first black female referee. Maya seems to do it all. During the week, she's a leader in her school for the students of Virginia Beach, and on the weekends, she's a trailblazer for all young women worldwide. And undoubtedly, those who know her have learned that nothing's off the table when you work hard, push yourself, and follow your passion. It's even more fitting that she's now at the Achievable Dream Academy at Lynn Haven Middle School, because she truly understands the hard work and dedication to make your dreams come true.
I chose to become a physical educator mostly because I wanted to go into education and I couldn't see myself teaching any other subject. I've had a passion for athletics ever since I was a child, and I just didn't think that my personality, my pace of life wouldn't fit into a normal classroom. So I couldn't see myself being, a math teacher or English teacher. I had to be something that was active and that taught kids how to be active and taught kids how to be social. Oh, the room don't like you. Come on. I chose a career path of football officiating through my coworker, Sean McMahon. At the time, he was a high school official in our area, and he was in charge of recruiting new officials. And he was just adamant about me starting football officiating because there weren't any women at the time doing it. There were very few. And he just took me under his wing, and, not only as a teacher, but took me under his wing as a fellow official. And he just pushed me and, just to learn everything about the game because I knew absolutely nothing about it other than what I see on TV. And so that was always a challenge to me with trying to master something that I knew I would face some adversity for doing it, because I am a woman. I obviously never played, as an organized sport. So it was a challenge for me to, to gain that respect from my male peers.
She knows the game. She's great at officiating. She's been doing it for quite some time now at a high level. And so I think she represents where we want to go in society. Is that, we want equality throughout all of our industries. And Maya is going to do that, being the first female African-American referee in the National Football League. And that's someone who's from here in Virginia Beach, someone who is teaching our youth everything that we feel is important: integrity, perseverance, determination.
Ms. Shaka, year after year, has gone above and beyond as an educator. She not only models for our young people what it is to be a strong, educated, well-spoken, powerful woman, but she gets involved in their lives.
Teaching students to build resilience through adversity is an underrated skill in life that isn't necessarily taught all the time. And I think it's important that students right now, they learn this skill, because once you hit the real world, whether it's at work or next level for education, or if you choose to take on a career in athletics, you're always going to be faced with something or somebody that is going to be standing in your way of your goal. I never dreamt that this moment would come true. There was a time where I thought I was just going to be stuck being a college official. It took me 7 years to reach this point. I never gave up on my dream. I continued to work like it would always happen. It just shows you it's not cliche that hard work pays off. As long as you keep focusing on the process and not focusing on the results will come. I never see a challenge I dislike. I don't back down from it. And I think that it keeps me going. I never want anything to come easy for me.
My thing for her is that you're just a referee now. It's not male or female. Yes, you broke the barrier. You broke the barrier being the first black female in the NFL, but you're just a referee. We have females in the NBA, and they're referees, and we all have to be looked at that way. It's very important when you're given a platform that you take that platform, and it may be about officiating. Use that to help the community, and I believe she feels the same way.
I think when you see little girls throughout our nation and throughout the world, they can say, hey, I can do that. I can aspire to be an NFL referee. They might not enjoy playing the game, but they make sure, they can ref the game. They can be a part of the game.
I consider myself a role model for students because I'm someone who is close to their demographic. And I've experienced a lot of things in life that students would like to experience themselves. I'm officiating in the National Football League. These students turn on the TV and they see these athletes. And for me, just to be able to share my experiences with my students, I think that gives me a little more credibility with them. Them being able to see the way that I work every day, and them being able to understand that because I reached this goal or I reached a level of notoriety, it doesn't change the type of person that I am. And I think that's real important for them to see that, you know, I'm still the same person. I'm just like them. And so I think that's more important than me actually reaching a goal or reaching, you know, a specific level of fame, is them being able to see I'm still me.
So we just want to thank her for representing Virginia Beach City Public Schools and so well, and showcasing for our students that anything's possible with hard work and dedication. Also, earlier this month, we recognized our amazing school counselors and school board clerks, and I'd like to take a moment just to highlight them here as well. Of course, the goal of National School Counseling Week is to honor the tremendous impact our school counselors have in helping students achieve school success and plan for their future. The job of our school counselor is often one of many hats: counselor, teacher, cheerleader, and opportunity coordinator. But one goal is always the same: support our students. So for all of this and more, I want to extend my gratitude to our school counselors. Also this month, we celebrated School Board Clerk Appreciation Week. These individuals, as you all well know, work tirelessly to serve our school board members, administrators, school staff, students, and our community. And this year, maybe more than ever, I think it's important to thank these staff members who have remained attentive and ready to step into action as needed. So let me just also say thank you to our school board clerk and deputy school board clerk for their continued dedication and service. So if you haven't had an opportunity to thank these many individuals, a reminder that it's not too late. When you see them, say thank you, or you just send a card or share a shout out on social media acknowledging their hard work and dedication every day using the hashtag #WeAreVBSchools. And finally, for my last item this evening, I also want to take a moment to recognize the dedication and hard work of our school board. You know, as we shared at our last meeting, February is School Board Appreciation Month. I think the job of a school board member can be a tough one. You all may know what I'm talking about. As a school division, we've had some unprecedented conversation over these last years, and you all always make difficult decisions affecting our students and staff, and I know that you do that from a place of love, and that the passion that you display comes from wanting what's best for our school community. Safe to say that our division would not be as strong without the continued guidance and support offered by this board, and for that, board members, I'd like to say thank you. Each year, the division works to honor our board in a creative way, and this year's no different, but don't take my word for it. Let's hear from some of our students. Uh-oh. Well, we may have a technical difficulty with that video, but we'll make sure we get that cleaned up. I hope you could tell, even by just looking in their eyes, what they were saying to you, which is that they appreciate your hard work and they're thankful for you. So thank you all for your continued work and support. And Madam Chairwoman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. All right, we have a series of minutes to approve next, beginning with February 1, the special school board meeting. Any modification to these minutes? Mrs. Manning?
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but I have a screenshot of the section that needed to be fixed. Item 5, Item 5, the last sentence, Ms. Hughes, the reason for abstention, it needs to say without public input, not with. Inappropriate to vote on a resolution with is what it says.
Okay, thank you. Any other modifications? All right, hearing none, motion to approve. Mrs. Hughes, and a second, Mrs. Holtz. All in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have unanimous vote.
Thank you. Now we have the February 8th, 2022 regular school board meeting. Any modifications to these minutes? Mrs. Hughes.
Well, I probably slept on my chance here, but earlier when you asked about amending the agenda, I raised my hand. I wasn't acknowledged, then I went ahead and voted. But February 8th and February 15th minutes were not sent to us until 11 o'clock last night. Can we defer them to the next meeting so we have an opportunity to read them before we vote on them?
So you're,
I mean, we
a
should be reading
motion,
them.
are you making a motion to defer?
Yeah.
Is there a second? Mrs. Manning? Minute, so is there any question before we vote on this? Or anybody else want to share if they didn't have an opportunity to look? Excuse me?
Is she asking to reconsider her vote?
No, to defer the minutes to allow time to
I know,
to
but
view
we've
them.
already voted on
No, we're on
approval
February
of
8th now.
the agenda.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Can
we're
still
on the,
understand.
Right, and we have other things later on where we
Yeah,
add and
I
delete
get
things
it.
as
I'm
things
just-
come up, but they weren't emailed until 11 o'clock last night. I do feel like part of our due diligence is being able to read everything, and that doesn't happen if they come that late. They don't normally come that late, but I would like an opportunity to be able to read them before I vote on them.
I'm just saying this is a procedural issue. Miss Linetti, would you step to the mic, please? Because the agenda has, the adoption of the agenda has already taken place. So I'm saying now is not the time to go back and rearrange the agenda unless
It's an appropriate motion. The motion is to approve, and they're making
just
a
defer the
subsidiary
minutes.
motion to defer this based on information. So it is an appropriate motion on the floor.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. Everybody understand we're voting what, to defer approval until the next meeting. All in favor, show a raised hand.
Okay, Madam Chair, we have unanimous vote
Right.
to defer the
Okay.
minutes, of the February 8th and February 15th to the next meeting.
All right, so February 15th, school board meeting.
The same thing, I actually mentioned both of them in the same.
Okay, though I didn't make it clear that we voted on both, so I apologize for that. So just for the record, we'll have
Yeah,
a
same motion.
separate
then.
vote, a second, the same second, Mrs. Manning? All right, all in favor of deferring approval of the February 15th minutes, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have unanimous vote.
Okay, that brings us to the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing on the school operating budget for fiscal year 22-23 and the capital improvement program for fiscal year 22-23 through fiscal year 2027-28. And Madam Chair, would you please introduce the first speaker?
Thank you. Our first speaker will be Kathleen Slindy.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. My name is Kathleen Slindy. I'm president of the Virginia Beach Education Association. My comments this evening are about the budget. The fact is, this budget cannot give your employees a raise that addresses how far below the average salary for teachers in the U.S. we currently are, $6,486 below the average. In fact, a recent study found that educators earn 10.4% less than the state's average salary compared with all other occupations in Virginia. And we rank 50th compared to the average salary of primary and secondary school teachers to the average salary for all jobs in each state and Washington, D.C. Naturally, we can expect for applicants for school vacancies will go where the earning potential may be greater. These are our asks. First, though the budget cannot realistically include a 10% raise this year, we ask for a 10% raise to be the goal for next year. Second, this year's proposed decrease for employee contribution to health benefits program be significant so that it will have the desired effect of helping to retain and attract employers. Third, we ask that the incentives offered to the new hires be contracted and divided so that a portion of each will be given at the beginning and the rest will be given at the completion of the contract, much like the military does with incentives. Fourth, that the division look at reconstructing the step scale so that there's a 1.5% increase instead of a 0.5 increase for each step of experience, so that employee compensation advances will move more quickly, and more adequately reflect the career ladder continue to escalate as more is added to the curriculum and the list of teacher expectations. The parameters of this change have to change so that employees have time to devote to their families and other interests beyond schoolwork life. How could we do this?
30 seconds.
Examine what is working and what is not, what is necessary and what is not. I'm going to just skip here. Certain specialists, the special education and English as second language teachers, absolutely need more time to accomplish their record keeping and parent communications. The SION adjusts this for ESL, so please adjust it for special education. In some, we need both more money and more time. The task is monumental and very important. The VBA and our membership, along with everyone who believes in our work, is ready to help. Thank you.
And that is time. Our next speaker for the public hearing is Jeff Cobb.
Welcome, sir.
Chairwoman Rye, members of the school board, Dr. Spence, and administrative staff. My name is Jeff Cobb, and I am a retired teacher with 38 years in Virginia Beach, as well as a member of the Virginia Beach Education Association. And I bring you greetings on this Wild Deuces Day. Tonight, I speak to you on the superintendent's estimate of needs as it relates to teacher retention. I have recently received notice from Virginia Beach, both directly and indirectly, that the division is looking for a few good old war horses to work as substitute employees during a time of need driven only partly by COVID. Those who answer the call would receive, I believe, in the neighborhood of $115 to $125 a day. I must respectfully decline for many of the reasons that you've already heard over these previous weeks and months. Groundhog Day may have passed, but as I review the 2022-23 superintendent estimate, I see many of these problems being played out on a loop. For example, I see that the proposed raise for many instructional staff eventually totals out to 5%. While this is better than the last several years of my career, during which a succession of flat contracts left no monetary incentive to continue, more work remains at the top of the scale and in certain critical areas to keep our teachers on staff. This might help reduce the need to drag the streets for more substitutes. It would definitely aid in the continuity of instruction. The SION makes vague references to money being spent to improve ventilation in classrooms. No amount of political posturing can fog over the fact that being in a relatively small space for hours at a time with 30 children is not the same as visiting the grocery store. We should be grateful that so many parents and students have supported the schools, their staff, and most importantly, the health of all to cooperate with the guidelines. However, we need more expenditures to improve ventilation and accelerated use of the federal monies most contributed in taxes. Yes, I recognize that we have more specialty staff hired to assist kids with specific needs. Sadly, though, I see language pertaining to potential cuts in classroom
30 seconds.
staff to save money. This is a self-defeating prophecy. As more teachers leave through attrition and or frustration, VBCPS should do even more to strategize and expand both to support those who remain and show the promise of support to those we recruit. As you've heard from many others, kids and staff kept me going after stagnant compensation and rising unproductive demands on my...
And that is time.
Thank you very much.
Feel free to follow up with anything unsaid. Okay.
Madam Chair, we'll move on to our public comment speakers. Our first speaker is Amber Thompson. We'll move on to the next speaker, Kathleen Brown.
And welcome.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Brown. I first want to discuss the budget I'm combining for I'm sure you'll appreciate that. For the public watching, the taxpayer funding for schools is $1,095,914,066. I echo many concerns brought up in public comments at recent meetings. I did have trouble locating the budget. I finally found it. And when I did, it was not as transparent as I would like to see. Given this budget is over $1 billion taxpayer dollars, I would really love to see a little bit more breakdown before you pass it, because afterwards it's going to be too late for any of the public to give any feedback for you guys to consider in your vote. I want to discuss the teacher pay situation, but first I do want to indicate I am not advocating for collective bargaining. I believe teachers deserve better pay than you're giving them. After talking to many teachers, I have realized that teachers with almost 20 years worth of experience in our system in a master's degree are only making about $6,000 more than a teacher with half as much experience in a bachelor's degree. I see a really, really big problem with that. And a lot of the teachers do too, that pay gap. It's just not something that they're okay with. Unfortunately, I don't see you guys working towards fixing this problem, and this budget does not address it either. So I'd like to see you guys work towards trimming back some of the fat and determine what the needs are versus the wants, and reallocate so you can pay the teachers what they deserve based upon their service and dedication to Virginia Beach City Public Schools system. There's about 45 administrative staff positions, and they make up about 5.2% of our budget. I think you could start your reallocation there. My last comment on the topic of budgets is actually a question I hope you can answer, and that's whether or not the retirement funding is fully funded. I want to make sure these teachers are getting what they deserve later on down the line, and I know that, at least on the city side, they're not fully funding, so I want to know if it's fully funded here. I want to shift gears to talk about masks. Because of Senate Bill 739, masks and whether or not the kids are wearing them, it is state law.
30 seconds.
I think you guys know that you're bending the state law when it comes to the buses. Biden's mandate does not include school buses. It's specifically listed, actually, as excluded. So
That's
you
a
guys know you're
Department of
bending the law on
Transportation
that one,
policy.
and that needs to be fixed. And I would also like to see teachers have the option to make their own healthcare decisions about masks. Thank you.
We'll move on to our online speaker, Sarah Gerloff. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm going to give a summary of some of the decorum I have witnessed here. Let's begin with Dottie Holtz's decorum. It is well known that the good people of Virginia Beach are collecting signatures to recall 6 school board members. Dottie Holtz took to her social media to bully local restaurants that had agreed to host a recall signing event. Her behavior infringes on our First
This is
Amendment right
discussed
to
every
petition
single
the
meeting
government,
now.
as she cried out to boycott these businesses. These businesses have been hit hard by the unlawful COVID policies, but Dottie did not mind attacking them while they were down. These businesses pay taxes that pay the salaries of our teachers. I guess Dottie does not understand the saying, "Don't bite the hand that feeds." She also does not understand the school board's no bully policy. As I pointed out during my last speech, Carolyn Rye has infringed upon our First Amendment right to free speech by cutting off certain speakers that speak truth. She also treats speakers unequally. For example, on one occasion, Ms. Rye allowed an acquaintance of Beverly Anderson to freely speak about another individual's attire and referenced that her clothing must have come from Walmart and that she should drape herself in an American flag and go cry in the corner. I'm really not sure what this information had to do with our schools, but Ms. Rye did not call this speaker out for being off topic or for using incendiary language. So much for the equality BB school board is striving for. Several inappropriate books were pulled from our schools only to be put in after Dr. Spence had them reviewed. Spence made a comment a few months ago regarding these books to the effect of this. What one might find offensive, another may not. Well, in my opinion, anyone who does not find these books offensive, any books like these, such as these offensive, containing pornography and pedophilia, needs a mental evaluation. I recently received a letter from Dr. Spence's attorney that appears to be an attempt to intimidate me and infringe upon my right to free and truthful speech. Spence, did you know that according to U.S. Code 241, it is unlawful for you and your attorney to conspire to intimidate me in the free exercise of my First Amendment right? Also, please tell your attorney, Mr. Schwartz, that I appreciated the substantial gem of information he has provided me regarding your unapproved
30
business.
seconds.
Using a reference from the movie Spaceballs, tell Mr. Schwartz that my Schwartz is bigger than his. So there you have it, folks, a brief summary of some of the behavior being exhibited by these so-called adults here that are supposed to be setting an example for our children. I can certainly say they are setting a fine example of how not to behave. Their behavior is appalling.
And Madam Chair, that was our last speaker for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to the information portion of the meeting, and we begin with interim financial statements. And welcome.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. As of January 31st, the overall revenue trend remains acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. As mentioned last month in the presentation, our current projected state revenue based on our updated projection on the March 31st ADM and the governor's proposed amendments reflect a deficit of approximately $5 million. We are still waiting on the final approved governor's budget. For this reason, these are estimates and will be finalized after General Assembly action. Federal revenues are showing an acceptable trend at this point in the fiscal year. Other sources of revenue for the month are acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. The next graph shows that sales tax receipts are at a favorable level. Year to date through January, we are approximately $5.6 million higher than the same time last year. February sales tax receipts are also coming in about $1.9 million higher than February last year. The last graph shows that the expenditures and encumbrances trend continues to be acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. This concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, we seem set. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Ms. Pate. This brings us to the operating budget and capital improvement program information session.
Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, school board members, and Dr. Spence. For this second budget workshop, we wanted to do a brief presentation to reacquaint you with the highlights of the outgoing governor's introduced biennial budget, updates to the actions in the General Assembly, the compensation funding included in the superintendent's estimate of needs, and an overview of federal pandemic relief funding. This slide just shows you the highlights of what we were going to cover. In former Governor Northam's introduced biennial budget, he included the 5% raise for funded SOQ positions, expanded the early reading initiative to 4th and 5th grades, which requires the division to provide an additional local match. There were funds to hold divisions harmless for re-benchmarking data and hold harmless related to reduced sales tax revenue from the elimination of state sales tax on groceries. He proposed to increase the staffing ratio for English language learners from 20 per 1,000 students to 22 per 1,000 students. He included in school construction grant funding and provided additional at-risk funding, which also requires an additional local match. So these were many of the main components that we built the budget around, realizing that General Assembly actions could change these initial proposals. Crossover for the General Assembly was Tuesday, February 15th. On Sunday, February 20th, the House Appropriations and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committees released their budget packages. Today, amendments to budget bills were to be available, and the Chambers is scheduled to approve their budget plans during Thursday's floor session. A budget committee of conference composed of House and Senate negotiators is to be in place by midnight tomorrow. And as you can see from this slide, the other upcoming dates listed for the remainder of the General Assembly session. The state's budgets the General Assembly Money Committees approved on Sunday make a significant investment in K through 12 public education, but take different approaches. The House Appropriations and the Senate Finance and Appropriation Committees went in different directions on pay raises for teachers and other public employees. Recall former Governor Northam proposed the 5% raises in each of the two-year budget. The House proposed to split the proposed increase between 4% raises and 1% bonuses in each year, while the Senate kept the 5% raises and added $1,000 bonuses for SOQ positions only with no required local match. The House supports eliminating the 2.5% sales and use tax on groceries and backfilling with state revenues, the 1% for share for public education and the 1% share to localities. The Senate also backs eliminating 1.5% of the sales and use tax on groceries, leaving the 1% local portion untouched. It proposes to use state funds to replace money from the sales tax that would be distributed to school divisions. Both House and Senate make K through 12 public education their top priorities, including restoring state funding of some school support positions that the General Assembly had capped in the SOQ in 2010 because of the revenue losses during the big recession. The House included funding over 2 years to help school divisions pay for a full-time principal in every school, one assistant principal per 400 students, and reading specialist staffing standard of one reading specialist for every 550 students in K through 3. They also include funding to support startup grants for lab schools. The Senate proposed to increase state funding of school support positions, as that provides a step forward eliminating the funding cap, and also funding to provide a reading specialist staffing standard of one specialist for every 550 students in K through 3, with the flexibility to allow these specialists to work with students in grades 4 through 6. Other Senate recommendations include funding to provide $5,000 recruitment incentives for teachers filling vacancies in hard-to-fill positions or hard-to-staff schools, funding to support existing before and after-school or summer learning programs, as well as funding to support statewide efforts to increase our educator workforce and teacher residency programs. The House proposes to use state tax funds and money from the Literary Fund to establish a loan rebate program that would leverage up to $2 billion in bonds to help localities replace or modernize school buildings, and that includes establishing a school construction fund. And the Senate endorsed former Governor Northam's proposal of $500 million in state funds for the same purpose. The Senate has approved 5 bills to help localities with school construction and modernization, including the creation of a school construction fund. So it is said that this will be the largest education bill ever, so stay tuned as bills and money become final. This next slide summarizes the funding for compensation presented in the superintendent's estimate of needs. We just wanted to give you a visual of what we've already presented to you to reacquaint you with the public with this information. And you'll see all the 5% raise, the investment in the health insurance, the insurance plan, the increase in the subrate, reclassification of various positions, increased allowances for advanced degrees, and converting 10-month custodial positions to 12-month. This final part of the presentation covers a high-level update of our federal pandemic relief funding. Just a reminder that the division must consider if the use of funds is intended to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, including impacts on the social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs of students. You can see the other areas to consider, with the point being that we do have limitations on the allowable uses of these funds. This slide just reiterates the 3 major ESSER fundings we have received, the dollar amounts associated with each of those awards, and the expiration date of those awards. Now we're going to go into each of those major awards really briefly. They are lists, they are broken down by categories and kind of give you ideas of what these funds are being spent on. They are in our approved applications. They're broken down for like personnel benefits in ESSER 1. You'll see the additional staff for modified schedules, the class allowances, there were stipends, there was a COVID-19 assessment team, there were additional funding for school nurses to support community vaccination efforts. Under purchase contracted services, you see the HVA systems, the cleaning, disinfection, and installation and replacements in schools. We had online student assessment, subscriptions and resources for students, technology to support remote work for employees. We had the purchase and installation of audiovisual technology for schools, and we had roof repair and casework replacement of the schools listed above. Under materials and supplies, there were portable hotspots for students, HVAC materials and supplies, contactless bottle filling stations, the Ring Central Call Center. We had technology devices for students and employees, interactive whiteboards, PPE, and supply kits for students. We also had protective partitions to promote social distancing, sanitation supplies for buses, schools, and facilities, medical supplies for school clinics, and the technology and supplies needed for our COVID health assessment team. And under the capital outlay category, we had HVAC upgrade and maintenance for Kimsville Elementary, Bayside High, Indian Lakes Elementary, and Plaza Annex. I will say too, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, you will see some of these items repeated over as that funding is built into each of these pots of money. So I don't want to go read into a lot of this again, but you will see on ESSER 2, we started with the support for Virtual Virginia. We still have the health assessment teams. We had stipends for bus driver recruiters, teacher stipends, retention incentives for the critical shortage areas that was brought to you, the retention incentive for teachers. Under contracted services, we had Zoom video conferencing license, subscriptions for ebooks to expand student access. There were letters training, software licenses for eHall Pass, contracted services with CHKD to expand education around mental health needs. And other charges with the monthly rate for the hotspots to provide internet access to students. Under materials and supplies, we had upgraded devices and peripherals for teachers. There were PPE, textbooks, and related materials for professional learning. We had the hand sanitizer, disinfectants, all the things that we incurred a lot of during this whole period of time. Where cafeteria tables to accommodate social distancing and upgraded devices for classrooms. Under capital outlay, we also had the purchase of commercial washer and dryers for 7 schools, and this is associated with the additional cleaning and the supplies needed for that. Under ESSER 3, again, you will see some of the same ideas that were in ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. We did expand. We still have stipends. We still have family outreach representatives. We had an additional ESL teacher. There's the stipends for bus drivers, tutoring, contact tracers. That was one of the things that brought in on ESSER 3. We had the daily site-based subs. We were able to increase the teacher sub pay $30 a day with this funding. We had staffing for the vaccination clinics, retention incentives for the teachers. That was split between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, workshop pay for tutors, and concurrent stipends for Virtual Virginia Beach teachers. Under contractual services, we have all the things for students for learning tools, software licenses, translation services, subscriptions, instructional software. You'll see some of those listed there. There were design fees and contracted service for HVAC, roof, and other repair projects. We had tutoring services, contracted services with communities and schools. Again, you see the Zoom video. We had contact tracing software and licenses. In internal services, we had bus fuel for summer school transportation. Under other charges, we had the hotspots monthly rate and the internet access subsidiary for students. Under materials and supplies, we upgraded additional devices for teachers in classrooms. We had cafeteria tables and seating furniture for social distancing. We had instructional supplies, again, all the hand sanitizer and those types of things. We had the replacement things for air purifiers, PPE, and again, material and supplies for HVAC. And again, under capital outlay, there were HVAC and other repair projects. So we just wanted to give you a kind of a rundown of all the things that are on these, coming out of this funding. It seems that these questions come up on a regular basis. And those are the items that we are actually expending funds on in order to do under the allowable uses for this funding. So items of note. This is just to provide context and clarification on items that also come up on a regular basis. One of those areas is reversion funds. We know trying to get reversion funds approved from FY21 for appropriation in FY22. These are one-time funds, and they are reappropriated to the division in the current fiscal year. So they are appropriated to us for this fiscal year, and they're not part of the FY23 operating budget. Same goes with reversion funds for CIP projects. They do impact the CIP project timeline, and so by moving that, allowing those to be completed in a more timely basis, they are likely to be reflected in your summary sheets that you see. And again, ESSER funds, they're not funds the division receives upfront. Those funds, we are giving grant awards, we actually book budgets, and then we upfront those costs. And then we ask for reimbursement, meaning the division incurs the expenditure initially, we file reimbursements with the Virginia Department of Education, and then those funds come back to us to reimburse us. We, if those funds, by chance, do not get spent for the purposes of which they're intended by the end of the award period, they are not returned to anybody. It's just that we didn't spend them and we didn't ask for reimbursement. I will tell you, for many years in this division, that it is our policy and our philosophy that we do not let those funds go unspent. We use them for the things that we need and for the uses they're used for. So that concludes the presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm turning it over to Jack.
Thank you, Ms. Pate.
I just have 3 slides, and then we'll bring her back up to answer. And the format that we'll go through is, we had some questions from the last brief, so I'm just going to address the questions that came out from the last brief. So the first one was related to, and the 2 questions are kind of related to each other. So the first one came out was, what projects are included in the $28.1 million for renovation and replacement for energy management? That's CIP 1-001. So the $28.1 million that was being referenced was the programmed funding. So that's kind of what I'll call the total number. And that is comprised of the appropriated to date, which is 11.2, 11.3-ish. And then the current budget for this year, which is 1.9 million. And then the rest of the funding through the 6-year CIP, and that's all in the book. You can kind of see it lined out there. So appropriations to date, 11.3 million roughly. And you can see on this slide things that are included. So retro commissioning at 8 schools. So that's for our heating and air conditioning type of equipment. When you commission a school, you do some detailed analysis to make sure that it's delivering airflow and cooling and heating in the way that it's designed to do. So retro commissioning is essentially the same thing. Think of it kind of like a tune-up. And we've done that on 8 schools. We've done lighting replacements at 8 fields, including football, baseball, and softball fields. HVAC testing, adjusting it, and balancing at 3 schools. The boiler and cooling tower replacements and upgrades at 1 school, cooling tower replacement at another school, and then a windows replacement at a school. And then part of that question is, what's the priority for what's next? So down at that bottom bullet there was a bid that we put out for those 3 schools, Lincoln Park, Newcastle, and SeaTac Elementary Schools. We received it back and it was above budget, and we value engineered it and we couldn't get there. So it's going to need to be put back out for bid again, which will be end of summer, into fall, when we'll be able to get a new bid for that one and then be able to go complete the work. So that's what that was in reference to. All right, what is the $28.1 million going to? The other part of that question seemed to be, all right, well, how does that compare to this other one, which is the energy performance contracts? Phase 2, which is CIP 1-016. So the first one, you could kind of hear, based on the way that I described what happened with the boilers at those 3 elementary schools, that it's a design, you bid it, and then they come out and build it, they do the construction. So energy performance contracts are, you hire a vendor, they come and they do a detailed analysis, excuse me, and then they recommend what changes can be made to improve energy management. And then they're obligated by the contract to actually achieve the energy savings that they said that they were going to achieve. So when that CIP was built, it was deemed more appropriate to be able to closely follow those that kind of fell into that model, to use that as its as a separate CIP fund, and that's why it's separate from that one. last question that came up was related to, good catch in the difference, the way that it's worded in the book between our playground equipment and our tennis courts. So the agreement is with the city and Parks and Recreation that we are going towards a 50-50 share for both tennis courts and for playground equipment. There's been some years that it hasn't worked out. And then fortunately, for this year, they have the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and they intend to fully fund Green Run High School. And they're also doing several of our playgrounds. So what that means is we can move forward more quickly to be able to do some of those fixes. And, you know, it's been a couple of years since we came and we talked about playgrounds. I think it kind of blew everybody's minds at how expensive they were. And we felt like we were behind and not be able to make much progress. This certainly helps us out, that participation from the city and that grant funding to help us move things along a little bit more quickly. So that's all I have. I will bring Crystal back up and turn it over for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mrs. Manning?
Yeah, so Mr. Freeman, thank you so much for answering those questions from the last meeting. I appreciate that. Ms. Pate, you said we get reimbursed the ESSER funds. How long does it normally take us to get those back?
Usually we file reimbursements on a quarterly basis for those fundings, and the accountants and business services will prepare those reimbursements, and they're filed electronically. Staff at VA DOE can be short, so the turnaround time varies, but we track all of the revenue that comes in and make sure that it gets posted correctly and matches the reimbursement request that we put in.
I mean, is it usually from the time you send it? Is it a couple weeks, a couple
Oh,
months?
it could probably be 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Ms. Pate, can I, with respect to the health insurance premiums, in past conversation, we've been talking percentages. Can you provide some actual dollar figures for the benefit of our staff and teachers on how this translates?
So at this point, Mercer is currently working on what those rates look like. Because our health plans are done in different tiers, they have to actually go in and spread that properly through the tiers, especially in the POS plan. So they are working on the actual rates at this time. So I don't really have actual rates at this point. That'll go into effect in January.
So if you can just repeat the general ballpark percentages.
So the way it's looking is between like a 40 to 50% reduction in those employee rates. That will put us on the POS plan. We were trying to get in line on second ranking and align our rates more with Norfolk, but they won't be the same rates as Norfolk, and again, because it's the spread of that tier, over those tiers, that investment. High deductible, we're going into the 6 because that plan needs to have more plan design changes in order to move us up into the rank. And we did do an investment on the retiree side to try to get those rates down to about 43%.
Thank you. Anything else right now, colleagues? While you're here, if you can just remind everybody of what's ahead and when we're going to be actually voting on the budget and the time frame for any other questions.
So March 1st, we have a special meeting. We're hoping at that point in time we'll be able to give you any updates coming out of the General Assembly. They probably will not be done. I think they're scheduled really to be done more like March 12th. And then the governor, I think, has till April 11th to do his final action. But we are hoping that you all will get any information you need and questions answered so that we may have an approval on the March 1st special board meeting. We were informed today that we are tentatively scheduled to present to City Council on April 19th. I think it's at 2 o'clock. The way the city's doing it now, it looks like every department is going to be requested to make a presentation to City Council regarding their budget request. Some are as short as 15 minutes, others are 30 minutes, ours is 30 minutes. So again, it's tentatively right now scheduled for April 19th at 2 o'clock.
So the calendar we approved, 'cause that's why I asked the question. I thought when I looked earlier, was I looking in the wrong place, that it said it said March 8th because we started this process a little later.
There is a March 8th meeting if needed. So if you're still having questions and we're still trying to work through numbers, or we're still trying to, yes, we still can go through March 8th.
So it's.
That'll
been-
be a regular board meeting.
But we're allowing the possibility for action on the 1st,
We
is
are.
what you're telling us?
mhm.
Just so we're all clear on that. So the time is of the essence there. But we certainly, as you had reiterated earlier in past meetings, we can go, if we needed to, we could go to March 8th.
Correct.
Right. So everybody's clear on that? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I just make a comment?
Okay, never mind. Sorry. All right, English, our ESL, English as a Second Language program, our comprehensive evaluation. And welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I'm Dr. Allison Bach, a program evaluation specialist with the Office of Research and Evaluation. This evening, I'll provide an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the comprehensive evaluation for the English as a Second Language program. The evaluation report you received in your agenda materials provides additional details. The purpose of the ESL program is to prepare English learners to be college and career ready through integrated content-based language instruction. The program aims to develop students' English language proficiency so that they will have access to the same educational opportunities as all students. The ESL program is based on standards developed by WIDA, the World Class Instructional Design and Assessment Consortium, and EL-related federal and state regulations. During 2020-2021, 1,768 students received ESL services. These EL students spoke 70 different languages. As a reminder, 2 previous evaluations were conducted focused on implementation of the program. The comprehensive evaluation for the 2020-2021 school year focused on the program's operation, student characteristics, extent to which goals were met, and stakeholder perceptions. In addition, the evaluation included the impact of the pandemic and addressing actions taken regarding the recommendations from the Year 2 evaluation. Surveys were sent to staff, EL students in grades 4 through 12, and parents of all EL students. Response rates and numbers of respondents are shown on the slide. Student and parent surveys were translated into the 4 most frequent non-English languages and provided when appropriate. 32% of the completed parent surveys were translated versions. EL student data were also obtained from the data warehouse, including demographics and English proficiency. In addition, school usage of the division's interpretation services was obtained. The first step for identifying EL students is through the home language survey provided to parents when enrolling their child. If a parent indicates a language other than English, the student is assessed using one of 2 screeners to determine English proficiency. Students who are deemed to not be English proficient are eligible for ESL services. Due to difficulties with screening students in person during the pandemic, ESL teachers could interview parents and students to determine whether the student should be presumed to be an EL student until screening was possible. Overall, 572 students were considered to be presumptive EL students at one point during the school year. Upon screening, 63% of these students were determined to be eligible for ESL services. In the spring, EL students are assessed to monitor their English language development and determine their eligibility for services the following year. Elementary and middle school ESL instruction was predominantly provided through the push-in model, where ESL teachers supported classroom instruction, which occurred for both in-person and virtual EL students. To facilitate these services, it is recommended that EL students be clustered in classes. Survey results indicated that 43% of elementary school ESL teachers and 17% of middle school ESL teachers agreed that students were effectively clustered in classrooms. Elementary school and middle school ESL teachers also worked with students in small groups as needed following the pull-out model. At the high school level, students received services through ESL courses. 2 ESL teachers exclusively taught all virtual EL students at the high school level. One recommendation from a prior evaluation was to expand the availability of ESL instructional materials and resources. Various instructional materials available to all ESL teachers were purchased during the 2020-2021 school year. Overall, 79% of ESL teachers and 69% of classroom teachers agreed that the instructional materials available to them were appropriate for the EL students they taught. There were increases in comparison to the previous year, with an increase of nearly 50 percentage points for ESL teachers. During 2020-2021, 43 full-time ESL teachers provided instruction to EL students. This was an increase of 12 ESL teacher allocations in comparison to the previous year. As shown on the slide, although ESL teachers had low agreement with statements about caseloads and time, there were increases in agreement percentages in comparison to the previous 2 years. Over the past 3 years, 39% of ESL teachers have agreed that students receive all services that are needed. A total of 1,768 students received ESL services, which was an increase of 44 students in comparison to the previous year. These students made up approximately 3% of the student population. The majority of these students were in elementary school. In comparison to the division, a higher percentage of EL students received instruction in person. 2 additional groups of students were monitored through the ESL program. A total of 157 students' parents opted them out of services. Though these students opted out of instructional services, they were monitored quarterly and participated in access testing. An additional 466 former EL students had previously attained English proficiency within the last 2 years and were monitored biannually. Data were also collected to assess the program's first goal on professional learning and collaboration. All ESL teachers participated in professional learning to increase their instructional effectiveness with EL students, and 34 to 35% of classroom teachers indicated they participated in professional learning to increase their understanding of and capacity to teach EL students. For classroom teachers, this was a decrease compared to the previous year. Additional data showed that 83% of ESL teachers and 74% of classroom teachers agreed that ESL-related professional learning enabled them to meet students' needs. As shown by the figure on the slide, low agreement percentages were found for items related to collaboration between ESL teachers and classroom teachers. However, in comparison to the previous year, there were increases in agreement percentages for both groups on both items. The second goal was that the ESL program will be student-centered and provide EL students with a variety of choices and opportunities to help students reach their goals. Selected results showed that 92% of EL students agreed that they were learning and doing things in school that were matched to their needs and interests. In addition, in comparison to the division, similar percentages of former EL students who had reached English proficiency within the last 4 years were enrolled in an advanced course, completed a CTE program, earned an industry certification, and enrolled in TCE. The third goal is that the parents of EL students will be provided with supports and services to enable them to support and participate in their child's education. A recommendation from a prior evaluation was to develop a plan to provide translation and interpretation services. Beginning in the 2019-2020 school year, translation and interpretation services were available for staff to use when needed to communicate with parents of EL students. Staff can submit school or division documents to be translated for families with a 2 to 3 day turnaround. To use the phone interpretation service, staff call the toll-free Voyance phone number, enter the VBCPS account number and their school's PIN code, and select the language needed. The interpreter then calls the parent. This interpretation service is available to staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if needed. Phone interpretation usage data showed that 82% of schools throughout the division used the interpretation service at least once during 2020-2021. Of the 269 parents of EL students who responded to the survey, at least 88% agreed that their child's school informed them about their child's progress in English and academics, as well as that they understood information from the division. One student outcome goal was that the ESL program will foster EL students' social and emotional development to support students as they become confident learners who feel part of their school community. Selected results showed that most EL students agreed that they worked with others in a group, had positive relationships with peers, teachers, and administrators, had a sense of belonging to their school, and felt that school was a welcoming place to learn. EL student agreement percentages were similar to or higher than the division student agreement percentages regarding the items noted on the slide. In comparison to the division, lower percentages of EL students consistently attended school and had fewer than 6 unexcused absences during 2020-2021. The second student outcome goal was that EL students will attain English proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. VDOE provided the required proficiency level gains on the Access test for EL students depending on students' current grade levels and previous year's Access test score. Although VDOE provided targets for the percentages of EL students who should meet the required gains, the requirement was waived for 2020-2021. The figure on the slide shows the percentages of students who met the required proficiency growth over the past 3 years, as shown by the different colored bars, by grade level group, as shown by the 3 sections of the graph, and by proficiency level group. Overall, there were declines in the percentages of students showing the required growth in comparison to the previous years, with the exceptions of students in kindergarten through 2nd grade in the highest proficiency group, and students in grades 6 through 12 in the middle proficiency group who showed increases. To some extent, the decreases may be due to the impact of the pandemic. Overall, across all grade level and proficiency level groups, 50% of EL students showed the required growth from 2019-2020 to 2020-2021. A comparison by instructional setting showed that a slightly higher percentage of in-person EL students showed the required growth than the virtual EL students. Satisfaction data showed that high percentages of EL students, parents, and administrators were satisfied with the program, while somewhat lower percentages of classroom teachers at all levels and ESL teachers at the elementary school and middle school levels were satisfied. Although not shown in the figure on the slide, in comparison to 2019-2020 data, there were increases in satisfaction for all staff groups at all levels. Based on the results of the evaluation, it is recommended that the ESL program continue with modifications noted in the following recommendations. Recognizing the school division continues to experience the impact of the pandemic, it is recommended to continue working on areas noted in the Year 2 evaluation, such as clustering EL students in the classrooms at the elementary school and middle school levels, communication and collaboration between ESL and classroom teachers, and professional learning for classroom teachers of EL students. The third recommendation is to conduct an evaluation update during 2021-2022 focused on the progress of EL student English language development, academic performance of former EL students compared to non-EL peers, and progress related to the comprehensive evaluation recommendations. At this time, Dr. Nicole DeVries, Director of K-12 and Gifted Programs, will share the administration's response.
Thank you. Thanks, Allison. Good evening. The administration agrees with recommendation number 1, as well as continuing the ESL program with modifications noted in recommendations 2 and 3. As part of the administration's response, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide an overview of the ESL program itself, as well as some of the areas we are working on strengthening. I'd like to begin by reviewing information about the ESL program from last year, the 2020-2021 school year, since that is the year for which the evaluation was conducted. It's important to note that the ESL is a federally monitored program through Title III and therefore has compliance considerations for instructional services. We continue to see an enrollment increase in our English learner population as we have for the past several years. Our top 4 languages continue to be Spanish, Tagalog, Mandarin Chinese, and Vietnamese, with Spanish being the top spoken language other than English. Last year, VBCPS staffed 43 full-time ESL teachers, 25 at the elementary level, 9 at the middle school level, and 9 at the high school level. There you go. This slide describes the current instructional model in place at each level. At the elementary level, the ESL teacher provides push-in, direct instruction, and they also pull students out into small group instruction as deemed necessary by the ESL teacher to meet student needs. There has been a change to the middle school instructional model this year. Over the past several years, middle school has primarily had a push-in model. Through teacher feedback collected over the past 2 years, teachers expressed the desire and need to include a dedicated ESL resource bell for those English learners who have lower English proficiency levels and need more support. With that in mind, the 2021-22 school year has been the first year we implemented a hybrid instructional model. In this model, the ESL teacher teaches ESL resource classes for each grade level and pushes into core classes to support those English learners with higher proficiency levels. We will continue to tweak this model, including the curriculum and curriculum resources for the ESL resource class based on teacher feedback at the middle school level. At the high school level, direct instruction takes place through an ESL course. Students who qualify for ESL services are scheduled for an English as a Foreign Language 1, English as a Foreign Language 2, English as a Foreign Language 3, and/or ESL effective reading courses. Students earn world language credits for the English as a Foreign Language courses, and English as a Foreign Language 3 was added just this year for the 2021-22 school year. For ESL effective reading, students receive an ESL elective credit. We also have the newcomer program at the high school level for those students who meet the qualifying criteria. In Virginia Beach, that criteria is an English proficiency level of 1.0 to 1.9, and they must have a gap of 2 years or more in their formal education. This program is housed at Lansdowne High School. In addition to these classes, we have started to build a cadre of courses that focus on sheltered instruction in order to ensure that high school English learners have optimal opportunity to take credited courses besides elective credit courses toward graduation. Sheltered instruction is specifically designed for English learners. The content is taught by a teacher duly certified in ESL and the content area, or by a team of teachers in which one is certified in the content area and the other is certified in ESL. For example, at Lansdowne High School, newcomer students take a sheltered environmental science class in which the ESL teacher and an environmental science teacher teach together to make the content and language accessible to students. Likewise, some English learners at Kempsville and Lansdowne High Schools take a sheltered English 9 class, taught by the ESL teacher who is also certified to teach English. Next year, we plan to add more opportunities for sheltered instruction so that English learners can take as many credited courses toward graduation as possible. We will continue to communicate with principals regarding the importance of clustering English learners so that ESL teachers can maximize instructional time. As English learner enrollment continues to increase, it becomes more challenging for schools to effectively cluster English learners, and ESL teachers have had an increase in the number of classrooms that they have to work across in multiple schools. This also makes it challenging for ESL teachers to meet the required instructional minutes. We continue to meet with ESL teachers to discuss and address these challenges. There was an increase in agreement for both ESL and classroom teachers that they were able to effectively collaborate with one another. We believe this is due in part to the decrease in caseload for the 2021 school year because of the additional 12 staff who were approved by the school board, and in part due to the unique COVID scheduling last year in which teachers had a dedicated planning day on Mondays, enabling the ESL and classroom teachers more time to connect. Although Monday planning is no longer available, we continue to seek opportunities for increased collaboration. Dedicated collaboration time continues to be a challenge because of ESL teacher caseloads and the need to work across grade levels and schools. We anticipate that English learner enrollment will only continue to increase, and ESL teachers will continue to have the challenge of effectively meeting all students' needs across the many classrooms and teachers with whom they work. Our goal, to the greatest extent possible, is to decrease administrative tasks for ESL teachers and to keep the number of schools they work across as few as possible in order to increase instructional time with students. For this to happen, we will need additional staffing and have requested additional staffing allocations for ESL for the 2022-23 school year to address both challenges of clustering and collaboration time. During 2020-2021 school year, we increased professional learning opportunities for both ESL teachers and general classroom teachers. We continued these opportunities this year. These are optional sessions for classroom teachers to attend, and unfortunately, attendance has been low. We continue to develop professional learning opportunities for classroom teachers, and will explore ways in which we can increase teacher engagement. Last school year, we implemented a new ESL teacher mentor program to assist the many new ESL teachers through their first year of teaching, especially under such challenging circumstances. This proved to be a valuable addition to the professional learning for ESL teachers. While we weren't able to continue it in its official capacity this year because we were not able to pull teachers out during instructional hours, new ESL teachers did have an opportunity to meet weekly with the ESL instructional specialist, and this proved to be a valuable time for them. We plan to resume the new ESL teacher mentor program in its formal capacity next year. The administration agrees that the additional evaluation update for 21-22, specific to the progress of English learner students, English language development, and academic performance is appropriate. We faced several unique circumstances regarding instruction due to COVID in 2020-2021, which include students experiencing an increased time out of the classroom. Some L students chose to receive all virtual instruction. Not all English learners took the annual language proficiency assessment, and the schedule of the annual language proficiency assessment was modified in order to adhere to COVID mitigations. We feel these challenges contributed to some English learners not making significant gains in language proficiency. With more normalized instruction and assessment practices in place this year, we expect to see more English learners making proficiency gains. We're proud that with the support of the school board and the tireless efforts of ESL teachers and our ESL administrative team, we've continued to strengthen the VBCPS ESL program. We look forward to continuing these collaborative efforts across stakeholder groups to help our English learners be future ready. I am joined by my colleagues from Planning, Innovation, and Accountability, as well as Kathleen Cahoon-Newchuk, our Title III ESL coordinator. And we welcome any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. DeVries. We'll start with Mrs. Manning and then Mrs. Melnick.
Okay, thanks. The newcomer program, how many students are in that?
Right now, I think we have about 13. Is that correct? 13.
Okay. And that's at Leonstown, so they could be coming from all different parts of the city, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then we have a significant increase in our budget on this line item for ESL this year, and so I'm trying to understand our numbers. And I know you gave us from 2021. Do you happen to know what our total numbers of students are for this school year?
We're currently sitting at 2,084 students.
Wow, that's a huge increase over last year. Are those primarily coming from South America?
For sure. Various countries. Yeah, various countries, but I can tell you that we do have a large population coming from our Central American countries.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Melnick and Ms. Owens.
So, pardon me for not knowing this, but there was a collective head nod, and I don't know if you could hear us, about the English as a foreign language credit for, we've always had that, right? Because I'm not sure that we knew that, so we all kind of looked at each other up here. So excellent.
So that students can receive credit for taking English as a foreign language.
Since this is their foreign language. Okay, correct. Got it. Okay. All right. Anything related to that okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Owens?
Yep, I have, I guess maybe two questions. On the, slide 5, where it surveyed elementary and middle school teachers, ESL teachers, about the agreement that students were effectively clustered. Actually, there was another one that said students had their needs. Maybe slide 8, with where we're asking ESL teachers, they feel like they collaborated to meet the students' needs. Mm-hmm. Does the challenge seem to just be the staffing and the just time to get together and to have that collaboration? Is that where we're coming up with that
Yeah,
issue?
so I think, there are several challenges. One is that we continue to see increased enrollment. And so, that just the sheer quantity of students coming in, we have to keep up with that. The other part is that because of the staffing numbers we currently have, teachers, ESL teachers are working across schools. And so at any given time, we were able to reduce the number of schools they work across. It's a challenge, particularly at the elementary level. With the 12 new staff that we got a couple of years ago, we were able to decrease that. But then as enrollment grows, that becomes an issue again. And with teachers having to work across schools, they are pushing into sometimes 30 teachers' classrooms within a week.
Wow.
And so to collaborate with 30 teachers becomes essentially,
Yeah.
very overwhelming.
Okay, thank you. And I know that you mentioned you guys are requesting additional staff. Did you tell us the number of additional teachers that you guys are requesting? And I'm just curious then if Dr. Spence can weigh in on where we're looking on our budget for having those additional staff.
So the budget request had 8 additional staff requested.
Great.
And there are 8 positions in the budget.
Perfect. Great. We want to get
Can I
those
just
staff out
ask,
there to you.
how will they be allocated, or is that something that will be determined?
So, oh gosh, do you remember how we said they'd be allocated?
made a final determination.
Yeah, so the
That's
majority of them
generally
would be
driven by
allocated.
caseload, right? I mean,
It
which
would
is
be by
determined as
caseload.
they're assessed as they
Right.
come in.
And so if the majority of, new students are coming in at the elementary level, then we'd have to allocate more, obviously, at the elementary.
Okay, okay.
Mrs. Franklin.
How much collaboration is done with the parents and the families of these students? I would think that for a big chunk of the student success is how much they were able to implement some of this at home as well. And so I'm just curious, do we have a lot of collaboration between the families, the parents, and the teachers?
So we have a lot, and I'll let Kathleen speak more to this, but we have a lot of, our ESL teachers are amazing with
I believe it,
communication with those families, and those families trust those ESL teachers. Because they're so good at keeping that line of communication open. Our ESL teachers do provide workshops for families, and I can let Kathleen speak a little bit more to that.
Sure. So our ESL teachers hold a family outreach meeting for families at each of their schools every semester.
Okay.
And they have really been utilizing the Voyance phone interpretation services and also an app called Talking Points, which actually is a texting app that allows for translation. So that has been key in communicating with their families.
Do we have any kind of joint venture with maybe adult learning as well for these families to have a pathway for themselves to also learn the language? a little
So
bit
the Adult
deeper?
Learning Center does offer ESL classes for adult learners, and that is something that our ESL teachers often share at their family outreach meetings.
Yeah, so there's a segue for all these families. Okay, thank you.
Okay, ladies, I think that does it for this evening. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for all the information.
Well, I'm back.
Hello.
Hello.
So now this leads us to student response teams, otherwise known as SRTs.
Yes. Good evening again, Chairwoman Bry, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. Again, I'm Dr. Allison Bach, a Program Evaluation Specialist with the Office of Research and Evaluation. This evening, I'll provide an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the outcome evaluation for the student response teams process. The evaluation report you received in your agenda materials